Okay, welcome everybody to the Alleghenies Ahead Podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Imhoff, and we're coming to you live today from the Outdoor Expo at Mount Aloysius College. You can see behind me here, there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of great organizations who are telling us about recreation in our region and the things that we can get outside and do. I just came down from the fishing with the president of the college. I think I still have a little fish slime on my hand. So there's a lot going on today, and it's great to be here. And I have with me today Mike Cook. Mike is the leader of the Johnstown Incline Plane Trails project, and we're going to talk in depth about his project. It's really one of our superstar projects here in Cambria County in the region when it comes to recreation. So before we dig into Mike's project, I wanted to just give a little overview of recreation and the importance of recreation within the Alleghenies Ahead plan. Recreation was a top priority of all 6 counties in the Alleghenies Ahead planning process. And, we're really starting to recognize that we have a lot of outdoor assets here. We have the mountains, we have rivers, we have these panoramic vistas that are just wonderful, and that there's a lot of opportunity that comes along with that. So there's several layers that recreation is important in our community, and certainly there's the public health component. Unfortunately, some of our counties lag behind on public health indicators when compared to statewide and national averages. So providing recreational opportunities for our residents is certainly important with all the public health benefits that come along with that. But then we're also looking at recreation from a workforce development and economic development component. Recreation and recreational infrastructure is something that people are coming to expect from their communities. So we need to take advantage of the natural assets that we have and provide those opportunities. And so Mike's doing that. And I just wanted to show off an example from our Cambria Regional Chamber of Commerce as an example of some of the ways that the outdoors are being marketed here. So this is a little mini brochure. It's hard to see on camera, and for our listeners, the Cambria Regional Chamber is our county-wide chamber of commerce here in Cambria County, and they put together a mini brochure that talks about all of the recreational opportunities. And we're talking about 48 trails covering 250 miles, 41 trails for mountain biking, 323 miles of rails to trails throughout the region, and 1,800 miles of naturally reproducing trout waters, 14 state parks, 4 ski resorts, 99 miles of cross-country skiing trails, 15 Class 3 waterways, 73 miles of whitewater. So, just in this little brochure, you can see there's a lot to do here in our region when it comes to recreation. And then the Cambria Chamber also did this, and I thought since both Mike and I are featured on the cover of the Cambria Chamber's regional directory for 2019 that I would show this off. So you can see this is Mike's band of mountain bikers here, and they're about to head down on the incline plane trails. This is at the top of the incline plane. And then I'm right here. This is another great event that takes advantage of our trails. The Ghost Town Trail hosts several races. There's a 50K race, a 25K race, and an 8-mile race that take place during the summertime. And so the chamber featured that event on their directory. So, this is something that's being emphasized, recreation at all different levels throughout Cambria County and the region. So with that, let's dig into Mike's project. Mike has an absolutely fantastic project going. It's deservedly gotten a lot of PR, and we're happy that he joined us today to talk about it and has the time. So, Mike, let's just dig in. Give us a little bit of background on your project and what you're up to.
Okay. Well, let's start with truly the roots of where the project came from. My office is downtown, and we have an hour lunch break, and it only takes me about 5 minutes to eat lunch. So I had 55 minutes to kill. I'm like, well, what am I going to do with my time? So I started walking around downtown. And one day I walked across the bridge at the incline plane, and I saw a sign on the side that said 2 trails, and I still had about 40 minutes left. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go check out these trails and see what they're all about. And it was really cool because they took you into a really wooded area that's directly adjacent to a metropolitan area. So you could get out during your lunch break and just kind of blow off some steam. Well, over the 5 years that I was going up there, just over my lunch break, I watched trees fall down, landslides happen, and they just weren't being taken care of. It's a city park, and I understand that it's very difficult to maintain that hillside. So my friend Dave came to me, and he used to race downhill mountain bikes. He said, well, we could put some world-class mountain bike trails up here. And I was like, all right, I'll write a proposal and take it to the city. And I did. And their solicitor approved it. And part of the deal with us building the mountain bike trails was that I would maintain those existing hiking trails and make them usable to the public again. That was about 17 months ago. We've been working on the trails for 16 months consistently. Every weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, we're out there removing trees, cutting knotweed back, doing all those fun trail maintenance things that happen.
So these trails were there when you started your project, right? Or what's the history behind the trails themselves?
This is
because I used to walk there when I was. When I met my wife, she lived actually in Westmont, right at the top of the incline plane. And this is going back many years, but the trails were there at the time. And, she lived a block away, and we would go hike the trails, and, we're like, wow, this is pretty cool. There's just the vistas from the trails are just phenomenal as you look down into the valley. But so I know they go back a period of years, but what's the history behind the trails?
This is all secondhand handed down knowledge to me. But from what I understand, there was a gentleman back in the late 70s that thought that it would be really nice to have some trails up there. And there was already an old existing access road, because before they put Route 56 in there was industry on that hillside. The Hawes Refractory was up there, and they were making bricks for the furnaces down at the steel mill. So there was already a road on the lower tier. And this gentleman came in the late 70s and expanded on that idea. It ran out to Yoder Street. There was a trailhead over there. And then it snaked back and forth up the hillside. And one spur went off and ended right at the top of the incline plane. And then another spur went out to Blair Street and ended out there. And those were the basis of the trail system that we built our trails on.
Okay. And so just so our listeners who aren't from Johnstown know what we're talking about, I just want to give a little background on the incline plane itself. The incline plane is probably now the number one tourist attraction in Johnstown, but it wasn't built as a tourist attraction. It was built to be very functional, and it was built in response to the 1889 flood that happened in Johnstown, which to give a short background on the flood, a dam broke in 1889 that sent a tremendous amount of water into downtown Johnstown being in the kind of the bottom of a valley. Thousands of people died, and it was one of the worst natural disasters in our nation's history to that point. So it's my understanding at the time that the town fathers decided that they wanted to build a way to be able to evacuate residents who are in downtown Johnstown out of harm's way should there be an additional flood or any additional flooding. And then at the time, the residential developments were developing on top of the ridge. And so it was a way for people to get back and forth to work, and also I guess an emergency evacuation plan. And so the incline plane, if you've never been there before, if you imagine it's basically a set of train tracks that are set up a very steep hillside. And I think the elevation I have here, the incline plane ascends 500 feet vertically, so it's quite a steep climb, and the angle is 35 degrees, and the distance is 890 feet from top to bottom. So there's this trolley car that's attached to these tracks. There's two trolley cars actually, and they're on kind of a pulley system, and they counterbalance one another as they go up and down. So it's kind of hard to explain if you've never seen it before, but it's a fascinating system, and the fact that that it's our number one tourist attraction now. I guess only adds to the allure and the ability of your project to draw people to the trails.
Yeah, it absolutely does, because you get a unique experience. one place where our trails are a little bit different than some other trail systems that you might see at, say, Seven Springs is you use public transportation to get back to the top via that incline plane. It's not owned by a ski resort. It's a public park that's using public transportation, and you can't get that anywhere else.
So who owns the incline plane itself?
That's Camtran.
Okay, and Camtran is our local transit authority.
Yes.
They run the city bus system, but they also own this very unique piece of public transportation infrastructure. And then the ground that your trails are on, the hillside around, does Camtran own that as well, or who's the owner of the
They
hillside?
don't. Camtran only owns a tract underneath where the tracks for the incline plane run. The rest of the hillside was a city park that was owned by the city of Johnstown. It's still technically owned by the city of Johnstown, but the Conemaugh Valley Conservancy recently agreed to lease that land so that we can work to develop a riverside park at the bottom of the trail. So if you're facing the incline plane, just to the left of the bottom station of the incline plane is where this park is going to be going. It'll be an ADA accessible park from the bridge that goes to the incline plane. It'll have real nice ramps that go down to the river, landscape, hopefully picnic tables, maybe if we could squeeze a pavilion in there. But it's going to encourage people to get down and start using the rivers a little bit more as well. As we turn them around and get some of the AMD discharges in the area cleaned up, they become really great fisheries.
Well, I want to come back to the Riverside Park, but tell us about your, when you kicked this off, when you started working with the city, what was the city's response? Since they actually, I guess, owned the ground at the time.
Yeah.
They owned the ground, and you needed permission from them to be able to do this project, because the trails had fallen into a state of disrepair and neglect almost, and the city didn't have the resources, as I understand it, to keep the trails in the shape that they need to be in.
Yeah, because they would have had to use their public works department to maintain these trails. They're not really, if you have to get equipment in there, they're not really accessible trails, which is why we've done everything by hand. But whenever I initially wrote the proposal, I thought they were going to grill me 1,000 ways to Thursday about what we were intending on doing. But I laid everything out in that plan. I told them the degree and the grade that we would build the trails to, how we would deal with runoff, what we would do with wooden structures, that we wouldn't put any additional man-made structures there because man-made structures require a lot more maintenance than natural ones. And they looked over that plan. They pretty much said, yeah, this is okay. Knock yourself out. And they signed the paper and
So when you first started out there, did you go to the city manager and say, hey, I want to revive the trail system, or how did that play out?
I put the proposal together and I went down to a city council meeting. And
now, was this unannounced? Did you give them any?
I was going to just pop in for the public comments.
Okay.
And in the parking lot, I had second thoughts, and that council meeting went until 11 o'clock at night, and they didn't take public comments till the end.
Wow.
Had I gone to that meeting and proposed it there, I don't think it ever would have flown, because the council people were irritated by the end and probably didn't want to hear anything about trails. Instead, I did. I hand-delivered the proposal to, at the time, Arch Liston, the city manager's office. He reviewed it with their solicitor and made sure that everything was on the up and up, and the city manager just approved it then. And then council obviously had to vote on it in the end, too, and they all unanimously approved that as well.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that's it's so important to have the support from the city as well, and it's nice to see that they recognize the importance of recreation and this project in particular. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's so. Getting back to the park. So there's now proposals to build kind of, when you go to the bottom of the hill, when you ride from the top down to the bottom, you come to kind of this, there's really not a whole lot there except for the riverbank,
right?
And then the bottom of the incline plane. So
yeah,
and I think there's like a little tunnel you can go through that's attached to the incline plane structure, but you guys are looking to kind of enhance that experience for when you get to the bottom and how you exit.
Yeah. Right now, going back to, say, the ADA compliance, to get to the trails, you have to pass through one of the support structures for the bridge that goes to the incline, which is less than 36 inches wide, so it's real hard to get through there. Then you go down a series of steps and across a small catwalk. When you're taking bikes off the trail, it's not the easiest. And when you're trying to get to the trails, it's not the easiest. So the idea is working in conjunction with PennDOT, because that bridge is PennDOT owned, technically speaking. an ADA compliant ramp will be built out and around that lower station, so you never have to go down those steps then. You'll just roll right over to the hillside basically, or off of the hillside. And then it'll be, like I said, a nice landscape park over there. Think of the North Shore in Pittsburgh, some of the stuff you see there in terms of landscaping. It's kind of what I see this park turning into for Johnstown. A real nice focal point at the end of Main Street. Well, it's not Main Street, but you can see it from Main Street. You'll have the incline and just an awesome park at the bottom as well.
So I think a lot of the focus has been on cycling, but you hope to have people hiking, biking,
Boating,
nature walking, bird watch,
everything.
Kayaking, boating.
Yes. It's a really great place for, say, like a college biology department to study invasive species, because we have a lot of knotweed up there, or just to talk about the flora and fauna that are in the woods around Pennsylvania, because it's a fairly untouched section of land up there. You can't hunt, so the deer population is ridiculous, and there are red-tailed hawks up there, squirrel, you name it. So I'd really like to see people thinking outside of the box for what that space can be used for. Hiking and biking are obviously the main focal points right now. I would like to really see that expand and encompass just the outdoors in general.
So there are different levels of trails in terms of difficulty. So if I'm somebody who just wants to go for a nice, easy hike, are there places for me? And then, I know from your mountain biking events, obviously there's, if you're a seasoned mountain biker, there's something for you there as well.
Yeah. There are a couple of different hiking trails. Regardless of which one you end up on, you have to go up the series of switchbacks. It's a long but steep climb, but it's a great hike. I would argue that even a novice hiker can handle that one. And then as you go up toward the top station of the incline plane, it becomes significantly steeper, and it's a little more advanced of a hike. There's some loose rock areas and things like that you have to keep in mind. But then at the same time, down at the bottom, the Rolling Mill Mine section, which has a lot of historical significance due to the Rolling Mill Mine disaster, so we like disasters in Johnstown, it's fairly flat. And there are plans on running that section out toward the Discovery Center and making that a nice flat hike. There's still some property acquisition that has to happen there, though, for that to happen.
Okay. Walk us through the user experience. So if I'm a cyclist and I want to, come check out your trails, and I've seen your Facebook page or your website or heard from a friend, what's the user experience? Where do I park? Where are the trails? How do I get back to the top?
All of the good details.
Yeah.
There is a small parking area on the corner of Tioga Street and Edge Hill Drive. Folks are welcome to park there, but if that looks like it's full, I ask that they don't park on the residential sides of the street, because I want to be a good neighbor to the people in Westmont.
Because the top is, the residential neighborhood's right there, right next to the edge of the hill. Right?
I jokingly told some of them, I'm like, I'm making you resort side property right now. You'll thank me in 10 years. So if that little parking area is full, I ask people to park at the incline plane designated parking areas around the mound over by the incline. The trailhead is on the corner of Tioga and Edge Hill Street. It's the only trailhead for the bike trails, because I want everybody to go past the warning sign, letting them know what they're getting into. And this way I didn't have to get multiple signs printed. All of the trailheads are right there. So we have a beginner trail and a slightly more advanced trail. Now, these are downhill mountain biking trails, though. These aren't like a beginner rail trail and an advanced rail trail. You have to have downhill skills to ride them. So
there's rocks and roots, and it's a very technical.
Yes, and if it rained,
type of
you're
trail.
riding in peanut butter the whole way down. So I tell people the bare minimum for their bike, you should have disc brakes and front suspension. If you don't have those on your bike, you have no right you have a right to be on the trails, but you shouldn't be riding down them.
And you need a helmet too.
Absolutely, I can't stress that enough. I have a full face only because I'm a little bit paranoid, but people ride with dog bowl helmets. As long as you have a helmet, we're happy. And the incline plane operators will yell at you and tell you you're not allowed on the trails if you don't have a helmet. Right. They're on board with us the whole way.
So I'm at the top of the hill. I've parked my car. I have my bike. I have my helmet on. Yes. I'm ready to go. So then what? Then
you start going down the trails. The beginner trail, it starts off kind of placid and flat. About 300 yards in, the trail drops down to your left, and that's when you start the downhill section. And it has a couple of twists and turns and drops in it, and then you go around a sharp berm that's a rock garden at the same time. It's eaten many a bike rider so far. If you went down the more advanced one, it starts off right away down a steep hill. And then it levels out for a little bit, and it goes through a series of sharp turns, and then the two trails merge and become one trail from that point forward, and they maintain the same difficulty as the beginner trail from that point on. In addition to that, we're building another trail right now that's going to be a little more beginner friendly. It's going to be more flowy and less downhill, so we're hoping we could attract more riders from that. But then 2/3 of the way down the hill, the bike trail and the hiking trail merge, and it becomes multi-use. The trail becomes very wide at that point. We've encountered hikers and bikers at the same time, have no problem getting out of each other's way, as long as you're cognizant that it is a multi-use trail, which I have signs that are going up for that.
Okay.
And that's to the bottom.
So you get to the bottom, and then what? If you want to ride again, you back up to the top, right?
You go across that little catwalk I was talking about, up a set of steps, and you hand the nice gentleman that's running the incline plane $3, and you ride it back to the top. That's the nice thing. They've got a couple of options for that. If you wanted a one-trip pass up to the top, it's only $3. I tend to buy their 10-trip passes, which are $20, and then they have a 22 ride pass for $40. So they've got a couple of options, and I'm working with the incline plane now to have a bike-friendly pass put together so we could track ridership, because before we were just buying the standard commuter passes.
Right.
And I would really like to see something that keeps track of how many mountain bikers are using it.
So it sounds like Camtran has been really good to work with, and has helped you guys out and realize again the importance of this project.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit before too about they have there's a little gift shop up at the top that sells souvenirs from the incline plane, and I think it sells ice cream and candy and a few other things. But you're talking to them about trying to turn that into like a little bit of a bike shop, right?
Yeah, because they're rocky trails, every now and then you'll pinch an inner tube and you'll need to replace your tube. You don't want to ruin your whole day by not being able to do that, so they're going to start carrying a couple of different size inner tubes, some tire levers to get your tire off the rim. And then over at the trailhead, the Johnstown Rotary donated a bicycle maintenance station. So it's a bike rack. You could put your bike up on it. And it has a whole pile of tools underneath. You can use your tire levers from the incline to pop your tire off, remount your inner tube, and then there's a giant pump right next to it, so you can pump your tire back up right there. So I guess it was August of last year that you officially opened, right? Yes.
Okay. So, I guess you've had a season in. Who's riding the trails? I mean, what are you learning about, who's out there as that time has gone on?
Yeah, that's the really great thing about these trails. I've been pleasantly surprised by where people have been coming in from to ride them. We have a lot of people that come in from Greensburg and Pittsburgh to ride the trails. State College was another one that we had a bunch of people come from. Then we get a bunch of folks from the local area too. There was a group of kids, they were probably 13 or 14 local mountain bikers out there using them last Saturday. And that's nice too, because everybody always complains, well, there's nothing for kids to do around here. Well, here's something that kids can do.
Right.
And it promotes them being outdoors and being healthy instead of sitting in front of something digital and, playing video games. And so we're seeing people from everywhere coming into Johnstown. That's you expect them to drive to Seven Springs, you expect them to drive to Blue Knob, but they're coming to downtown Johnstown to ride trails.
Right. Yeah, recreation, I didn't mention it before, but obviously the tourism component is important, and, bringing those tourism dollars into our local economy. And the great thing is, right at the bottom of the trail, you're in close proximity to a lot of restaurants and other cool things to do. Have you talked to some of the local business owners? I mean, where are you hearing or seeing people, the cyclists or the people coming from out of town? Are they visiting the local businesses?
They are. You burn a bunch of calories mountain biking, so people want food when they're done. They want a cool, refreshing adult beverage when they're done. So they're going downtown to places like, Stonebridge Brewing or Balance or The Press, and they're spending some money in Johnstown. I haven't checked with the hotel downtown to see if people are staying overnight yet, but that's something I plan on doing in the future. And then to help foster that, we're trying to get bike racks that have a standard theme that businesses can mount outside of their place to say, hey, we're bike friendly. We don't care if you're muddy. Come in here and have a beer. And we want you guys in our business. So we're trying to really promote that in the downtown area.
That's great. Tell us about the, who's doing the work? I mean, obviously somebody had to actually go out and, dig and move stuff and dig up tree roots and actually build the trail. I mean, how did that happen? I mean, I don't think you just hired somebody to come in and do this, right?
No. So before you build trail, you have to learn how to build trail. And I did that. I spent 2 weeks with Clark Fisher, who's doing the Quema homing trail system, 2 years ago. Just 2 weeks straight out there with Clark, and he taught me how to make trails the right way.
Okay.
So I took that knowledge and got a couple of suckers to come up on the hillside with me. And like I said at the beginning, 15 or 16 months straight now, we've been out there every weekend. And I was going to bring our primary tool is an 8-inch hoe from a company called Rhino. They're firefighting tools, actually. And they'll cut through roots. They'll dig rocks up. They're pretty phenomenal tools. I was going to bring one with me, but that's it. 8 inches at a time is how we build the trail.
Wow.
Bench cutting it. Yeah.
So you just recruited these volunteers yourself, or how do people, because I know it from seeing your Facebook page. I mean, these guys are literally out there every weekend, and all seasons. I've seen you, digging in snow, ice, rain,
mosquito season.
Yeah. So, how do you recruit volunteers? Who's helping you out?
I have a core group of people that have been coming out with me fairly consistently. That ebbs and flows depending on, holidays, family life, job stuff that people have to do. But I also did a bunch of outreach too. I got a couple of church groups out there that have spent just a day at a time. The Scouts came out, and Chris Cashaw in particular, he did his Eagle Scout project up there and did a water remediation project with some really nice lighting. I also had a service fraternity from UPJ come down, and they came out probably 3 or 4 weekends and spent a good bit of time helping us. And then there are just also people in the community that see the value in this and want to get out and help, that they'll come out for a day or two. They're not in it for the long haul, but for the long haul, it's usually a core group of 4 of us.
Okay. So you've had a lot of help. What have been some of the obstacles? I mean, what are some of the difficulties you've encountered as you've tried to do this?
Trees. Lots of trees. So for an example, the August 11th, the day before our grand opening event, where we had this race planned and we were hoping for this awesome turnout, we were riding the trails, went down them once and they were perfectly clear, went down them the next time, and there was a tree across them.
Oh, geez.
And it was a beautiful sunny day. You wouldn't expect this. So I called my friend Ed. Ed came up with this giant chainsaw, cleared that tree out. I get an email 5 o'clock that afternoon, somebody else says there's another tree down. Well, that first tree that fell down uprooted a second tree or loosened the roots just enough to have another tree fall down. And the reason for that is if you look at any pictures of the incline from right around the turn of the century, they logged the entire hillside. So that root structure just isn't there to hold those trees in the ground. So you get excessive rain or excessive wind and trees come down. And as a result of that, landslides as well. We've had to clear a couple of landslides where the ground just sloughed off and ran across the trail.
So do you have, people with heavy equipment, or what do you said you called somebody, like, what do you do when a tree falls down?
Ed has a chainsaw, and the rest of us have muscles, and we push the logs over the hill.
Wow.
And hope they don't roll down onto Mill Creek and crush a car. We're really careful about that.
But yeah, that's amazing. So from start to the opening day, how long did it take you to get it to the point where you were ready to open it up?
It was 9 months until it was rideable.
Okay.
You could hike it in that time, but it was just too loose and there was too much debris on the trail bed. It would have been irresponsible to send anybody down it on a bike. That and the hiking trail that was there, that was existing, the 2 mountain biking trails we talked about, we built those from scratch by hand. So we were just working our way down the hill with those, trying to find the best lays of the land to tie them into those hiking trails. So yeah, it was.
So you did a kind of a combination. You took the old trails that were there, spruced those up, but then you've also cut new trail as well.
Yeah, we figured why reinvent the wheel? We could put half of a mountain biking trail system on a hiking trails. Like, we didn't have to build that because it was already there. So we figured we'd utilize that and cut back on labor that way. Now, the trail we're doing right now, it is 100% fresh trail. It's not utilizing any of the old trail system at all. We're just doing it all from scratch.
Okay. Tell us about the opening day event. I mean, what was that like?
The opening day event was pretty fantastic, actually. So Katie from the Planning Commission helped us put it all together, because otherwise it would have been me and like 8 other guys up there riding bikes and then drinking beer afterward.
It's not so bad.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. We actually had a whole bunch of free hot dogs and beverages for the public. We got the mayor to speak. Lisa from the Tourism Bureau spoke. Jared Bunk from the local cycling community came out, and he talked about how important it is to the cycling community to put trails in. So we had like a ribbon cutting event, and then Leah Spangler led the first official hike down the trail. And then we had a race that day, and we had 20 riders come out, 10 in a beginner class and 10 in an advanced class. And we would have had a better turnout, but we scheduled it the same day Seven Springs had a downhill race. So we lost those riders to that. But 20 riders was just enough for proof of concept that we can make an event work on this hillside. And then afterward, Stonebridge Brewing and Jeremy down there, he was gracious enough to let us do an award ceremony down there, and everybody got to eat and hang out and spend some time downtown afterward.
Nice. Have there been other events since then, or do you have other events planned for the upcoming year? Yes
and yes. Last year, we also worked with Johnstown Running Club to put together a Veterans Day run. All the proceeds from that went directly to veterans community initiatives. We raised $250 for veterans causes. And we probably had about 20 people turn out for that run too. And it was cold and it was muddy and everybody had fun. Moving forward, we would like to do more running events on the trails or even hiking events. In addition, we're planning a downhill race series for the year. So we're going to try to put together a series of 3 races.
This is a cycling
series.
Okay.
Yeah. So a series of three races over the course of the summer. And then an award ceremony at the end. We're trying to get together cash prizes or even gear prizes, sweeten the pot a little bit more to entice more people to come and participate.
Okay. So now you're managing all those events, or is somebody else?
So far, so far I am, and I'm working with other groups to do it. I delegate nicely.
I found a quote as I was reading about this project, preparing for the podcast, and it was from the mayor of Johnstown, Frank Janakovic, and it was from your opening day event. And he said, "Today is one of those days where we're changing how we look at Johnstown and the natural resources we have here." And you know, I thought, you know, that was, you know, that sums it up right there in terms of the shift in thinking about our natural resources. You were there with the mayor. I mean, what does it mean to hear, you know, somebody like the mayor say something like that?
Seeing the city realize that there's value in this sort of endeavor is really important, because other people who might have thought about doing a project like this might have thought, it's the old guard in Johnstown, they're never going to approve it. And like, people don't want to see this stuff. They just want us to bring steel mills back. But then you see the mayor come out and speak so highly of a project like this. Hopefully it lights a fire under a couple of other people that want to take on a project like this and turn the area around. We have so many great natural resources out there. There should be no shortage of projects like this that people can tackle.
You know, I thought it was interesting too, because I don't remember the year, but you know, I've worked with Cambria County since 2011, and I want to say it was, you know, maybe around 2014 or 15. There was a councilman who had made a proposal, one of the city of Johnstown councilmen, who had proposed actually logging the hillside and cutting down some of those, some or all of the trees, just to, you know, to cash out essentially on the natural resources. You know, just so. And obviously that didn't go through, but to see it shift from where, you know, we're making proposals to cut down all the trees on the hillside to, you know, now having these trails that anybody can use and that are hosting these events and driving all this this spending and investment in the city. So I you know, it's just amazing how far it's come in so little time. Yeah,
and honestly, it would have been criminal if they had cut those trees down. Those trees kind of make those trails. You see these, we had one fall down, I counted the rings in it. It was 116 years old.
Wow.
So these are giant trees, and they're stunningly beautiful. And to take those out of there would have just cheapened the feel of that hillside, I think. So I'm glad that one didn't pass.
Yeah. What's been the most interesting, or some of the most interesting things you've seen out there during your work? I mean, you're out there every weekend, so I'm sure you see some fascinating things going on.
Well, the deer have become my friends. I see them more than my wife some weekends. One thing that we do get to see up there that's really neat, we call a trail treasure.
And there's no hunting, right? So that's kind of a refuge for the deer.
That
on the
is,
hillside there, right?
Yeah, they're completely not afraid of us. They just watch us walk down in the woods. We find a lot of really old bottles. And there was a tulip company in Johnstown at one point, I guess. We found a beautiful glass bottle that has this glass tulip on it. A whole bunch of whiskey bottles from turn of the century. I looked them up on eBay, and they're bonded whiskey bottles is what they're called, something along those lines. So we find a whole bunch of what we call trail treasure. Okay. We love that stuff.
Yeah.
That's been the most interesting stuff we've dug up there. Supposedly, what the guys that volunteer for me don't know is in the 1889 flood, one of the banks lost one of their safes, and it's rumored to be on that hillside. I don't really care about trails. I just want to dig a safe up, and I'm using trails as a cover for digging the safe up.
Maybe you found the safe and you're just not telling us. That's a cool story. And if you haven't already, I hope you find the safe one day to help pay for your efforts. So before, you're relying on a lot of people, to help you out with labor and such, and events. And as this grows, I'm sure, the need is going to become even greater. If one of our listeners or somebody who's watching wants to get involved, how can they do that? What are the opportunities out there for, just somebody from the general public to get in touch and say, hey, I think this is a cool project. I want to get involved.
Sure. Well, the easiest way to find out what we're doing is the Friends of the Incline Plane Trails Facebook page. Like you said, I post on there every weekend, and I read the messages on that page pretty frequently. If they wanted to get involved, say fiscally, I have a fund at the Community Foundation. They can make a donation to the Trails Project down there. Or they can reach out to me on a trail day. We're out there every Saturday at 9. Just come out and meet us. Even if you wanted to talk, if you had a group that, say, wanted to do something as simple as a trash pickup, there's always a need for that sort of thing. So you could get involved as little as you want or as much as you want. We can scale a project to fit your needs.
Okay. Well, this is a great project, and I definitely appreciate you coming in to share with us everything. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, or?
Let me think about that. One other ongoing thing, it ties into the trails. In 1989, a series of sculptures were made to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the Johnstown flood.
And this was part of when the trails were originally constructed, right?
This is 10 years later.
Okay,
they were initially constructed in 79, but they found a home for these sculptures on the trail.
Okay.
And you can still see the big one on the side of the hill as you're riding up the incline, but the rest of the smaller sculptures we removed. We're having those repainted, and as part of the Iron to Arts project, we're going to find a way to place them downtown so they're more accessible to the general public and people can get out there and enjoy them. They were done by James Wolfe, who's a world-renowned metal sculptor. He has stuff in the Museum of Modern Art and everything. And we have a whole pile of his sculptures in Johnstown. That's really a big chunk of treasure that we found on that hillside. People forget that stuff was up there. There's 9 sculptures that.
And didn't all the metal in those sculptures come from local foundries or local steel plants?
All of the local mills. The paint colors used on it were all paints that were left over in the mills, and they were some of the last things made in, I can't remember exactly which mill it was, but before one of the mills closed, these sculptures were the last thing fabricated in there. So they're very historical in nature, and if you can appreciate modern art, they're really cool to look at and see the different pieces and how he twisted the metal together. That's the only other thing I had.
Great. Well, It's a great project, the Johnstown Incline Plane Trails. Check it out, get involved, volunteer, help out, donate. So thanks again, Mike. Appreciate your time.
You,
it's great to be here at the Outdoor Expo. And I want to thank our production crew here, Corinne and Les from Mount Aloysius College. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of the Alleghenies Ahead Podcast.